So let me tell you how agents are procured and onboarded. How we find agents, the far and away best option for this is word of mouth. So that's you draw from your network, and your network includes all your guys and their networks, right? Oftentimes we'll ask the team, we need a few guys, who do you know that should be working for LSI? Or who do you know who should work on this contract? Who do you know that can handle an executive protection position? That's far and away the best one. Beyond that, we've had to recruit heavily at times. So we'll also use services like Indeed, ZipRecruiter, EP forums. Those are executive protection forums where guys will go in and talk to each other. Facebook groups, job fairs, referrals, obviously. Sometimes guys will just come in through the website looking for work, or someone will come to us unprompted and say, hey, my brother has the background and experience, you should use him. That type of thing.
Are those people like super common? Like there's a lot of people with like military background or law enforcement experience, or like there's a lot?
I've had different views on that, right?
I mean, I realize it's a very general question, like no, a lot. What does a lot mean?
It's a good question. It's varied through time. It's a good question for now, because since the pandemic, there was a huge upheaval in every industry, including security. So we used to have tons of guys, and it was very hard to get a job, because you had to compete and you had to have the best background and resume. I've won jobs because I had good training and experience, and I've lost jobs because it wasn't as good as somebody else, or they wanted a military background and I didn't have that. So it varies. It has been very difficult in the last year or so. So a lot of people moved out of state. Huge corporations were throwing exorbitant packages at agents to build up their teams, because they were able to do that. So it dried up the talent pool significantly. We're starting to come on the back end of that to where guys are more available. You really have to know where to look, and you actively look and be effective in your recruitment. Doesn't matter if there's only one guy left or 100 guys left, like you got to do the work to find them. And sometimes it's more or less depending on what's going on in the industry.
Okay.
Yeah.
But also there are 19 million vets in the US today. So there's a lot.
Yeah, there's plenty of people that need work. We are very veteran friendly, military friendly, law enforcement friendly. If a guy has performed effectively in government service, they know how to work in a team, they understand a chain of command, they know they typically mission first. There's exceptions to every rule, but those are backgrounds that help. Then we have private sector security specific guys that just work in the private sector, no background in military or law enforcement. In my experience, even though they don't have that type of experience all the time, I started like that, they try harder because they know who they're competing with. So they'll work hard, they'll do more private sector training, they'll invest in themselves, they'll go to courses and train with different instructors in order to become well-rounded. It comes down to the person and the guy's character mainly, but we assess all those things.
And do all of the agents have to have licenses to carry weapons?
Yeah, so 80-90% of what we do are armed details. So the minimum requirements to be employable are a guard card and an exposed firearms permit from the Department of Consumer Affairs, Bureau of Security and Investigative Services. That is for a uniformed armed position that is exposed. You can see the weapon system. Beyond that, you'll need those things and a concealed weapon license for any type of static detail, we call it. It means they're not moving with clients. They work a residence or a corporate office. Any mobile details, which is executive protection teams, they'll need all of those things and some form of EP training or school. So those are the minimum requirements for those different activities. Guys will come to us sometimes without all of the requirements. If they don't, we help them. We give them resources, what school to go to, what permits do you need, that type of thing, and then we'll reassess once they turn those things in. In California, the Department of Consumer Affairs, Bureau of Security and Investigative Services licenses security personnel in the state of California. If a guy wants to carry plain clothes, for example, you're on an executive protection team, you don't want anybody to know that you're armed. Or at a residence and they don't necessarily want to see that and you want to carry it concealed. You also need a California concealed weapons license. Or an HR 218 compliant ID. What that is it is a law enforcement ID that has been approved for the guy to carry off duty. With that ID, they can carry in all the 50 states. Whereas a private sector guy without that ID can get 3 or 4 state permits that cover about 30 some odd states, but they can't necessarily carry everywhere.
So if they're traveling with their principal or whatever, they have to be somewhere where it's covered.
Exactly. Or be law enforcement with that ID, and then they can carry there. Or we'll have maybe the agent in charge who is with the principal have a counterpart. So his advanced guy will be a local law enforcement or a guy qualified, and we'll use him, and that's who we'll use for the armed contingent. So obviously going to other countries, there's a lot of non-permissive environments. So you'll have to use locals for things like that, or vary your package depending on where you're going to be operating.
Wow. So you have to set all that up. So
Yeah.
if someone in your account is going out of the country, you have to know and liaise and figure it all out.
Yeah. There's actually quite a bit that goes into it.
And who at LSI handles that? What position?
Management.
But specifically, it's the COO would do that?
Yeah. Ideally, it's ideally it's the detail leader. So this is good questions. This is something that we're fine tuning. Whoever's running that account should be doing, meaning whoever is the lead on that movement should be doing that. Management often has to help with that because that guy's so busy on the ground doing his job that he may not have time for that. But that's part of his prep. It's part of management's prep to set him up for success. Right.
Okay.
So there are country threat assessments through the State Department website that we'll look at to get a good idea. Some places in the world are very safe, and some places are very not safe. So we'll do a lot of background on that prior to the detail. And sometimes that time frame, we like a big time frame. Sometimes that's really squeezed. If somebody calls me today and says, "Hey, we're leaving to wherever, Africa tomorrow," that's tough.
Yeah, no, I get it.
There's a lot of work that has to go into that.
Okay.
That wouldn't happen. There's enough logistics that you got
Sure.
to sort that out. But
Is there a text that you recommend that describes this subject?
the book is Advanced by Dave Johnson. That is phenomenal on advanced work. He covers every aspect. It goes very in depth all the way to the light sockets on the wall in a room. I believe he was in the Army, but he worked some very high level details and ran them. So it's a phenomenal book, highly recommended. Terminology, it'll square new guys away on terminology in the industry and give you the broad's eye view of how in depth you can get with it, and then you can scale from some of that.
And tell me the title and the author one more time.
The book is called Advance, and the author is Dave Johnson.
I think you were asking about certification. So what are the minimum certifications for an agent?
Minimum certifications vary depending on the detail. So I'm going to go through a few different details, and I'll let you know what that looks like. So, for example, we work a few schools, and we have uniformed armed guards at the schools. They need at least the guard card and the exposed firearms permit. For us, we typically will have them come to the range with us and do a training day. It tells us a lot. Is he proficient? Is he safe? Is he proficient? Can he follow directions? What's his personality? That kind of thing. Because schools are challenging. There's a lot of friendlies and there's kids around. If something goes badly where you needed an armed guard at a school, you better be proficient. That's a rough day, right? So those are minimums for that type of account. Now, on a residential security team or handling corporate offices or what have you, typically those are plain clothes, concealed details. So they'll need the guard card, the exposed permit, and a concealed carry weapons license. For those, we like some type of residential security training. There are a number of outfits that provide it. We would like to see that. It's not always 100% required. Okay. Beyond that, on an executive protection team where somebody's going to travel with clients, we want all those things mentioned prior, but we also want an executive protection or a PSD course, personal security detail. Usually those guys have worked in law enforcement and done some dignitary protection for whatever their responsibility was there, or in the military and done that type of thing. Then they'll come get some, they may also do some private sector training, and they've worked in the private sector also. Doesn't always have to be that case, but we want some significant training for that. They have to interface with clients, their points of contact. They have to think ahead with logistics. You always have to be 10 steps ahead of a client. They have to understand how to do it in advance. Our job when we're with a client is to protect them, yes, but we want to keep it seamless. So everything we do is based on State Department or Secret Service protocols, or companies that have that experience and train that way. So you'll learn how to work in a 5-man detail, but now you only have 1 or 2 guys. Good. You just condense those responsibilities down to those 2 guys. But we want guys to have that type of understanding so the client never feels a bump.
For the agents that have these licenses, and weapons licenses, are they good like forever, or do you have to refresh them or take some kind of exam?
So you have to upkeep them. Typically, concealed carry permits are every 2 years. There's quarterly quals for an exposed firearm permit. And then the guard card is every 1 to 2 years. You have to update that.
And then is that just for the state of California, or is that federal law, or who sets those?
State of California.
Okay.
So the Department of Consumer Affairs, Bureau of Security and Investigative Services dictates.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Do you mind defining guard card more specifically?
A guard card just means the guy has basic security training. It's a 40-hour course. Powers of arrests. I don't even think there's investigations in there, some basics, things like that. So it's just, what are your responsibilities going to be as a guard protecting a site? So it's very basic.
But it's like a California BSIS or something. Like, what's the exact, like, what is this card? Where do you get it?
From the Department of Consumer Affairs, Bureau of Security and Investigative Services. They issue the guard cards.
Cool.
Right.
Cool. And that's based on a test or a course?
Both. It's a 40-hour course. A lot of outfits provide it. And then a test is usually part of that course. Yeah.
Cool.
You also have to qualify with the exposed permit. It's not terribly difficult. We like guys to have more training than that, but you do have to qualify so they know you're somewhat proficient before you get the exposed permit. Another way you can procure people is building your network, which I mentioned a little bit earlier. So develop relationships with groups that provide agent resources. For example, training outfits. Camp Pendleton has job fairs, so there's that type of thing. There are different companies that provide the training that you want to see. Building those relationships and being a resource for them to place their guys is a good way to get people that are qualified.
Wow. How many of those companies are you have ties with?
We need to build it up. So this is part of a program we need to do. But there are 4, 5, 6 that are local, meaning between California and Vegas. Say a couple that are on the East Coast, but they're the top schools that that guy has some proficient training. Right? To get a certificate from that course, you have to perform.
No, but I mean, does LSI have relationships with any of those that you just mentioned?
We do. I've gone through a number of them, so I have somewhat of a relationship. There are others that we need to build.
So just a few, like 2 or 3.
Exactly. Good. So how we onboard agents is we use a software. Basically, they need to sign all of their onboarding documents, which is confidentiality agreements and non-disclosures, the employee agreement, and there's a few other agreements that they need to fill based on human resources requirements. So we have them do all that paperwork. We'll also do an interview. So we have managers interviewing. They'll record the interviews via Zoom, and then they'll send it to me or to whoever the detail leader is, or both. That way, that person who's too busy to do the interview can actually look in on it when he has free time and determine who he's getting. So interview copies of all the permits that are required. Then we have to check those and make sure that they are active. We've had some that we've found that are not active. We've even had a guy forge his, I think it was his guard card. No, it was his exposed permit. Literally forged it. I couldn't tell. We just had a manager who understood Photoshop, and the font was just off enough for him to check it. So we checked it, still looked like it was good. And then we checked it against the number and the guy's birth date and found out it was not. That was fascinating. Never seen that before. But that's a key step. You have to check the permits, right? Nothing at face value. We got to check it all. So get all those things, have them do all their paperwork, maybe come do a training day with us so we can get eyes on them and see how they operate in a group and conduct themselves. And then we'll go to placement. Okay, so there's various ways to check different people depending on their background. For example, a guy coming from the military has a document called a DD-214. It's just the government document that lists their separation of service. Was it honorable? Was it dishonorable? And there are a few different contingencies that give you an idea of how he did with his service. Tells you what they did in there, what date to what date. Any like major disciplinary issues or things like that will be in there.
Like a profile from the military.
Basically a profile of their military service.
And do you have to be in this kind of field or this kind of agency to get it, or anyone could just sort of look it up online and get it?
Typically the individual that you're recruiting will have it.
Oh,
Everyone,
I see.
anybody in the military will have it. Yeah, they'll send you a copy.
Okay.
Exactly. Law enforcement, a lot of that is word of mouth. There's not a DD-214 for law enforcement, but did they retire in good standing? That's your key. You know, if the guy resigned in lieu of termination or something like that, then you might have to look closer into that type of thing. The other thing we need to do is talk to whoever they worked for prior, who was their supervisor, what companies, and we'll talk to a few people and just verify the type
Check
of employee
references.
he was. Yeah, exactly. Yep. So that's how agents are procured and onboarded.